Greetings, fellow football managers, and welcome to the Austin McPhee fan club. No, I'm kidding. This is all about set pieces. First of all, going into this video, I need to say a big thank you to Forever Damned, who is, in fact, this channel's first ever member. So a huge shout out there. I'll be looking at providing even more value on that front. However, as a lot of you know, I normally don't talk about things like liking and subscribing and joining and all of this stuff because your attention is a valuable commodity and I don't want to waste your time. But I do want to give Forever Damned a big thank you. It's a fun little milestone for a small channel like mine to actually hit. It shows me that, you know what, there's some people who actually want me to keep doing this. So, do this I shall. Today, set pieces. Obviously, rule number one, you're not going to get anywhere with set pieces until you cultivate long, golden, flowing locks. If you can't, a wig is a fantastic investment. Failing that, you can pay a guy like Austin McPhee, let's see, $5,000 a week to solve your set piece problems. I'm not actually joking, a lot of football clubs are hiring guys like Austin McPhee, specialist set piece coaches, and you can see that a lot of football clubs around the world can be very, very good and extremely lethal when they have a set piece, whether it's a throw-in, a free kick, a corner kick. I'm going to underline this straight away. I'm not going to be talking about the meta stuff or the game-breaking stuff. Frankly, I'm not that interested. This set piece creator that you can see on the screen right now is a new thing in FM24. So if you're coming back to the franchise after a while, or this is your first iteration of Football Manager, this is shiny new stuff. A problem a lot of Football Manager players, I know I'm not alone in this one, is that there's so much information given to you as you go through the screens. Your inbox, I've just started a game with Aston Villa here because I wanted McPhee on the screen. Just this inbox shoots you with so much information. You start a game, you've got stuff about your new club, you've got supporter information. What are you even supposed to do with this screen, right? It's lovely, but what are you supposed to do? What is actionable? Actionable? Okay, this is actionable. We've talked about it in previous videos. And then here you've got stuff about your team. You're bombarded with information about how good these players are, what their contract situation is. Your staff is recommending what you do about it. It's so much information and it's very, very overwhelming. You go through all of this stuff. Okay, now I need to decide on my friendly schedule, my training intensity. It is so much. Oh, look, who are my players who are not around? Oh no, I've got two guys who are out for a year. Then there's rules about the league and all of this. And then finally it's transfers. Do I want to change my squad? I don't know, I've just been bombarded with information. So for me, when you're figuring out something like tactics, the best thing to do, or even set pieces, is to really slow down. When you have a new feature like this in Football Manager, it's nice to actually go through the induction because it's going to give you the basics. And in this video, I want to try and get you through some of the basics as well as a few little strategies that I use. Some of it you might find enlightening and maybe change the way you think about things a little bit. That is, in the end, my goal for players who are experienced. New players, obviously, I hope to try and simplify it a little bit. Okay, first decision you need to think about is what your marking strategy is when it comes to your club across things like throw-ins, corner kicks, and free kicks. Now, it is not important to say, oh, this is going to be a culture thing, I need to take a big decision here. No. This is just about giving you some presets to work with. As you can see, as I hover over these, there's a little tooltip which gives me pros and cons of the different options. This is cool to just slow down and read because this is how it works in the game. So the game is telling you, hi, this is how I work. Part of the problem with Football Manager is actually trying to figure out how things work underneath. So this is good information to have. However, this stuff is just preset. So if you have an idea of how you want your set pieces to work, don't worry about this too much. Just click something. If you think, okay, I don't want to spend too much time here, but this is the general idea of my play, click that. I personally like a hybrid system because I customize almost everything. Now you get the post marking situation. Again, this is a pretty big decision that you need to make. Now, one thing I can tell you is that the near post tends to be more valuable in terms of real estate when defending set pieces. This is obviously because the near post is closer to where the action is going. There's a good chance that the player taking a free kick or a corner kick may not strike the ball perfectly, and there a mishit generally tends to go to the near post. That is one thing. Any of you out there who have played golf will know that a water hazard in front of the green is much more dangerous than a water hazard behind the green. Correct me if I'm wrong there. For that reason, the near post is a big one. At the elite professional level, which we're dealing with in Football Manager, maybe not as much the case, but if you watch football day in, day out, or at least on the weekends, you will see that a lot of players just don't catch it right and keep hitting the ball to the near post where all of their team is attacking the far post. So it does actually happen. In Football Manager, whether it happens or not is a different question, but the near post is also extremely dangerous to attack, and therefore defending it is crucial. So here, do you want to have players on both posts? As you can see, the fullbacks will occupy, and the pro is the goal is more protected. However, fewer players are defending the initial cross. Personally, I like to go with the near post as a defensive option, but you can go with anything. It doesn't really change because, again, these are just presets. You can change them later on, and also you can change them based on your players. If your fullback is 6'7", like one particular Premier League team out there, do you want him on the post? Probably not. This one here is the preset where it starts getting a little bit dangerous. Do you defend the box? Do you balance it out? Or do you focus on the counter? Now, one thing to think about is late on in a game, if you're leading 1-0, the opposition is going to throw everything into the box. And then if you have everybody set up for the counterattack, as you see on the graphic, if you've got two players staying forward, obviously this can give you a goal if your guys clear it. But the odds that they clear it are lower because mathematically you've got more opposing players in your box to win a header or a second ball. Okay, attacking delivery. We talked about the near post as something, but in Football Manager, for as long as I can remember, the near post has always been really dangerous. It is just a little bit harder to defend. Why? Less time for the opposition to react to the delivery, and flick-ons can cause chaos. Chaos is a big thing. A lot of the quote-unquote meta tends to be about chaos, getting lots of players right in front of the goal. You know, your center forward, your attacking midfielder on attack, just getting lots of players in front of the goal tends to lead to goals. And that is a very valid tactical approach, especially lower down in the football pyramid. If you've played non-league football or something like that, you might have heard a coach or a manager go, let's get bodies into the box, let's lump the ball in and see what happens. Something to that effect. However, one thing that the game isn't actually telling you, but I will. The near post delivery is less likely to be snaffled by a goalkeeper. A far post delivery and a central delivery can actually be grabbed by the goalkeeper with much more reliability. Now, Football Manager is pretty realistic in a lot of ways. However, I find that the far post and the central deliveries are way too easy for a lot of goalkeepers to get. Goalkeepers who you think may not be able to get it can still get it. The goalkeepers who are not good at rushing out, so that rushing out stat on the goalkeeper, if they're really low in that, okay, they probably won't get it. If they're a sweeper keeper, they probably will get it, even with a middling stat. So you need to be a little bit careful about the far post corner especially. Let's look at central. This one talks about the goalkeeper's aerial ability. So it says effective against goalkeepers with poor aerial ability, and it's ineffective against goalkeepers with strong aerial ability. You need to weigh this up a little bit and see which kind of level you're playing at. If you're playing lower league football, this can be a good tactic because your goalkeeper who has poor aerial ability would have an attribute of like 5 in aerial ability, low jumping. We've talked about attributes before and things like benchmarking, videos up here. But once you get to higher level football, poor is still going to be something like 11, 12, 13 maybe is poor at the top level. But that's still generally enough to try and grab the ball when it's up in the air, or at least get a hand on the ball, punch it away, something like that. The goalkeepers at the top level don't make as many mistakes in Football Manager with this kind of corner or free kick as they do in real life. In real life, it's a super viable tactic to put 4 men around the goalkeeper and just prevent him from getting to the ball and then hope for that little bit of chaos inside the 6-yard box. In Football Manager, you can only mark keeper with 1 player, unfortunately, and you can't really prohibit him from coming out and get it. I have tried the central approach by man-marking the goalkeeper with one of my best players. What happens is the goalkeeper either gets the ball, or when the ball bounces around, it tends to be offside because the opposition press up a little bit and the guy marking the keeper is still offside and he's preventing the keeper from seeing the ball. That is also a real-life thing, part of the offside law which Football Manager gets right, but it can be tricky to navigate in this kind of situation. So, my advice, again, to sum it up with central, if you're playing lower leagues, this might be more effective than if you're playing a really good team. However, if you're playing a really good team who has a goalkeeper who is super weak in that area, Give it a try. Maybe you'll sneak a couple of goals. Could be cool. Far post again tends to be within the goalkeeper's area of influence, unfortunately. So near post, because of that, tends to be very, very effective. Okay, the defensive transition, leaving the X number of players back and so on, that's again a preset thing. Let's talk about that a little bit later. This one is important. Inswingers or outswingers. What the game tells us is quite simple. With the inswingers, it's easier to direct shots on target, and it's harder for the opposition to get distance on clearances. Also, higher risk of goalkeeper claiming the cross. Again, if you're putting it to the near post, that's probably not much of a big deal. On the outswinger, it says reduced chance of goalkeeper claiming, higher chance of keeping the ball in play, harder to score from initial, and more risk of being hit on the counter attack. Again, I wouldn't take that at face value just like that. Again, look at it in the context of your own team. If you're playing a top team, you will not have a problem scoring from outswingers, even though it says that it's harder to score from the initial header. Not really. At the elite level, it isn't. Inswinger is pretty deadly at the lower leagues because of what it says here, but at the elite level where you have players with really high corner delivering attributes, things like corners 16, crossing 15, stuff like that, and then on the other hand, you've got guys who have heading 15, heading 16, it's not really a big deal. But it can be a big deal when you're playing again lower or your team just isn't that good in the air, something like this, then you might want to compensate by delivering in-swingers. There's also a couple of big tactical considerations with in-swingers, but we'll get to those things in a moment. So let's go with in-swinger just for now. Approval from Austin McPhee. That's always important for me. Okay, the set pieces now in Football Manager work on a really intuitive ABCD system. If you haven't seen it, welcome. ABCD, how it works is, with this, where are we? We are defending corners. Let's go to the sexy stuff first of all. Let's go for attacking corners. That is probably why a lot of people are here if they clicked on this video. Attacking corners, again, there's ABCD here going on. A tends to be aerial threats when you are attacking. What this generally means is the players who have jumping and heading. We can click on aerial threats and get it here. We've got jumping, heading, and strength. That immediately is a clue that the game is telling you if you have these three attributes, your guys will win headers. And I think information like that is really, really valuable. So as you can see from this list, we've got a couple of really strong players. Somebody like Pau Torres. Let's just have a little wipe over him. Look at that. Good looking player there. That 17 jumping, 16 strength, 16 heading. And then let's go for the secondary attributes. He's got decent aggression and bravery. I think he'll do a good job scoring a couple from corners. You've got Diego Carlos, who has jumping 14, heading 15, but he does have some strength. So he should win a few headers based on his strength, even though his jumping is, let's say, a tiny little bit low as the second best header in this team, or second best aerial threat in this team. Tyrone Mings, I think he's out for a year, so he's not really in contention here. Longley looks decent in the air. Courtney Howes. Okay. So this team is pretty decent in the air. There's a lot of good strength across the squad. In fact, you've got jumping 15s, 14s, 15s, 13s, 14s. So you've got 11 players there who've got 14 and 13 in jumping. So this immediately tells me that getting numbers in the box is going to be quite vital. So if you look at this screen and you say you've got two guys at 17 or 18, you've got a couple of guys at 14, and then everybody's at 12, 11, 10, 8, and so on, then you're talking about a small team. But this Villa squad looks really big. Look at that. We have Douglas Luiz at 11, and then it goes down from there. Generally speaking, a lot of these guys will be on the team. I don't know the Aston Villa squad inside out like I do a couple of other teams, but these do look mostly like starters, or at least players who should start. Let's say 6 of them should be on the pitch at any given time, I would say. So you have 6 very, very decent players in the air because you're looking at a jumping level of 14, 15, which is again at that Premier League benchmark that we talked about in our tributes video. If we look at box threats, again, we've got some different things. Here, basically, you're looking at something like a poacher. You're looking at a striker who can figure out where the ball is going to drop and then finish. Jumping is not a thing anymore. You're looking at anticipation, off the ball, and finishing. So basically, if you have that Pippo Inzaghi, Michael Owen type player, this is what counts as a box-to-box threat, and they have their own category. So if you had Michael Owen or someone, you would drag him into this box threat category so that you can set his instructions specifically. Aerial threats are going to be set in order of how good they are. So Pau Torres would be your A1, and then you would have whoever else was next as your A2. Let's have a look at that list. So Diego Carlos would be your A2 if they're both in the team. And then if Tyrone Mings was on the team, he would be the A3 and so on. Basically, the players I'm most interested in are the A1 and the A2 because most teams will have a decent A1, A2. At least your two center backs should be quite decent in the air. When I play Liverpool, for example, it's Van Dijk and Konate. They're both 6'5", although that doesn't matter. They both have jumping 17, 18, decent aggression, good heading. So those guys are going to be my A1, A2 all the time. Van Dijk for the first season is normally A1, and then Konate becomes A1 in the second season, something like that, because Konate gets really big and strong. He goes to jumping 18 in season 2, season 3. So knowing who your A1, A2 is quite cool because you can then kind of direct where the goals come from as well. Hint, hint, wink, wink. That might be an interesting little tip from a future video that I do about upping the value of a player, getting them goals cheekily, putting them into your A1, A2 and stuff if they're a big player, and generating chances, making sure that they get goals can actually up their value. That's a little tip which doesn't have much to do with this video. But knowing your A1, A2, that's a big thing. Third category, C, is creators. Those are going to be your more creative players, obviously, but it actually shows technique, crossing, and long shots. So the word creators is a little bit misleading because creativity we understand as passing and vision. So it's not going to be somebody who can then play the ball back in cheekily through the lines. It's going to be somebody who scores with a long shot or puts the ball back into the box with a cross. That is your creators in this sense. This is also important to understand because the role of the creator normally is either at the edge of the box. You see the C1 and the C2 over here. The come short is also going to be a creative player. So I just told my C2 to come short for the corner. So now he's in a crossing position. Whereas lurk outside area far side, here, when the ball is cleared out here, he could get to the ball and then cross it back in. That's why crossing and long shots are the big thing, because they're either in these long shot areas or they're in these crossing areas. So that's something to keep in mind when it comes to creators. It's not passing vision. One thing to note though, that these roles are being set up normally by your assistant. Some of you do describe that the assistants and so on don't set the players up very well. So you can actually take this over by this button, yes, and take control. And then you can set up this list yourself. This is something that I know a lot of people do with free kicks and penalties, but you can actually do this with the A's, the B's, the C's, and the D's, and so on. People out there who are playing Liverpool, for example, you may not want Joe Gomez as your D1. If you want to finally get him that goal, you can put him as an A2 or something like that. Or at least on the aerial threats list rather than the recovery defenders list. So recovery defenders obviously is the D list. So those are the guys who are going to be staying back. Ideally, I think it's things like pace that you want. Yep, it's pace, marking, and tackling. Basically, I would focus on pace and tackling because they need to get to the ball and then make a tackle most like to stop a break. So even pace, tackling, and acceleration would be something that I would go for. Normally it is your fullbacks who are in these positions because those are the player profiles that normally actually have things like pace and tackling. For any Liverpool fans out there, that is basically the reason why Joe Gomez hasn't scored goals for a long, long time, ever. And I think he talked about it himself in a recent podcast. He said, look, one of the reasons I don't score is because I'm not actually up in the box for corners and free kicks. Poor guy. Okay, so we've introduced all the different four, which is A, B, C, D. So how do you actually manipulate them? Now, the game is going to show you a little zone type thing over here that you can see. That's going to be where the ball is delivered. We set that up using the preset near post. So you can actually change all of this stuff now. So the game has just put all of these things in to these different places based on the presets that you chose. Something that took me ages to work out. You can actually move these things around by clicking the dots and then bringing them across here. Let's try that again into the green box. There we go. So now we've moved a creator to a box threat. So we've introduced the box threat concept, which was not actually there before. We didn't have the ability to choose one. Now we do. So we can move these players around. And based on what you want to do with your tactical setup, you can actually move these things around. If you don't want the possibility of 3 recovery defenders. Now remember, on that point, we were talking about late in the game and the opposition putting more men in the box. Basically what you do is you have at least 3 recovery defenders, if you're worried about that, or 2 even, and then tell them, if not needed, do something. The problem here is their options are a little bit limited. I would have preferred to be able to give them specific roles. Unfortunately not, so go forward is all we can do, or have them lurking. So that's another good one, because when they're out here, they can still play a role in that. The problem is they may have low long shots and stuff. If they already have marking and tackling and these things, they're probably going to be one of your defensive players, like a defensive midfielder or a fullback, who normally don't excel at things like long shots, but you can't have everything. So it might be wise to actually have 3 Ds over here. I am very, very aggressive with my tactics normally, unless I'm playing a lower division, not a lower division, lower half of the table team, in which case I would definitely have the 3 Ds. I generally have 2 Ds and have one guy back at all times, like this. This guy is just going to stay back. I can give him an option to stay back if needed, so I can put everybody in the box, but that is pretty dangerous. So I'm going to have him just staying back as a matter of principle. The other guy's on stay back if needed, so then he gets an option. So if you want the guy to have an alternate option if he's not needed, so if the opposition don't have anybody here, or here, or here, he can actually then do the secondary thing, which is go forward. What is go forward? He's basically just going to be making a headache of himself in this kind of area. He's going to be in the box, but not anywhere specific. Now, the meat and drink of this, though, comes down to where you're delivering the ball. In that case, back to this zone here, and where the aerial threats are. So you need to now try and figure out, okay, I'm putting the ball here, so now I want as many of my big guys as possible to be attacking this ball. Or at least they need to be in this zone. This is why at the moment A1 is right where the ball is to be delivered, and A2 is attacking this zone. A1 attack near post, A2 attack near post. I could switch this to A1 stand on near post or lurk at near post, which means he's going to be a little bit more static. A2 is going to be moving around a bit, trying to shake his marker, and then attack the ball aggressively. So which of those two moves do you want from your player? That is up to you. Personally, I prefer to have one static and at least 2 guys attacking the ball. So normally an A3 then can also attack near post. So now I've got 2 guys attacking the ball, or at least the region where I know the ball is going to be delivered. And then I have one guy who is more of a static aim point as well. This guy, however, will flick the ball on quite a little bit as well. So it might be good to have a box threat attacking the far post or lurking on the far post. A little bit more static there, or just attacking the far post. This is again up to you. I like my box threat to lurk a little bit so he can then anticipate and then move if required. However, this is not the only way to play it. I personally like to have a decoy player. This is normally my A1 or my A2. Yes, I do use my A1 as a decoy in some corner setups, but generally, let's say we're using the A2, let's have him attack far post. Now let's get the B1 to attack the ball from the edge of the area. Look at the corner here now. We've got one big boy at this far post. So when you look at it from the opposition standpoint, the opposition goes, ooh, there's a big guy here. Somebody needs to mark him. And it's going to be their second best marker. Normally it's the best marker who'll be on the A1, and then the second best marker who'll be on the A2. Rule of thumb. So you're drawing away one of their best markers into this area, which is kind of non-threatening, and therefore you're giving these guys a better chance to actually win that header. And again, we looked at Aston Villa and we saw lots of players at that 14 or above. So this A3 and A4, they're also going to be something like 13, 14. If we look at these aerial threats again, you're looking at guys like Courtney Howes, if that's how you say his name, with 14, 15, and 15. You've got Konza with 14, 14, 15. We have Dendonka, who's got 15 jumping, low strength, but he's also got decent heading. So these 3 guys, or even Longley, might be your A3 and your A4. And alongside Pau Torres it was at A1, you've got 3 guys there, all challenging really powerfully for this ball, while one of the opposition, big man markers has been drawn out here. So this is going to be a very interesting kind of situation that you can do by using something like a decoy player. That is one of my best moves. Also, the A1, who is in a more static position, knows that he has a guy at the far post, or at least attacking the far post, who he can flick the ball onto. So that is part of the play too. So another thing that I like to do is something like this. This looks a lot like a real life set piece, doesn't it? So this kind of thing can be fun, where you have all of your attacking threats, your aerial threats, just charging at the ball. Can be fun for different types of deliveries as well. Because you're not telling them to attack specific areas, your tactical familiarity, you can see this little thing here, awkward, that needs to be up a little bit more before this starts becoming effective. But this is really chaotic and it's very, very interesting. It's fun to watch because it looks like a real corner. So a lot of the fun that I have with setting up corners and things like that is to make things which look real. For me, the central delivery doesn't feel real because for me, delivery to this, penalty spot area tends to be quite realistic. Unfortunately, it doesn't really happen as much in Football Manager, or at least you can't really instruct it by saying aim for center it comes a little bit too close to the goalkeeper. It's more to take advantage of the goalkeeper vulnerability. I would like it to be somewhere here, and these guys attack from a couple of paces deeper, but c'est la vie. Point is, just having everybody attacking the ball can be quite fun, although it is quite good to actually have a couple of static players to work as kind of pivots, or places where you think the ball might end up. Places like the far post can be good to have someone at least, especially if you're aiming for center, if you're aiming for near post and not having a flick on, the far post isn't then as valuable, but it could still be good real estate for you regardless. So when we use this near post attack and we have somebody like an A1 attacking the near post, we have something like an A2 lurking on the near post, this tends to be what a lot of players might use. Then you have a couple of guys attacking there. You have all the concentration in this area. Let's say we have this guy lurking at the far post. So here we've got all of the best aerial players from our team at the near post. Unfortunately, the opposition markers tend to be at the near post as well, or at least the better headers will, if they're playing zonal or hybrid zonal, they will have their best players over there. If they're marking, you don't need to be worrying about it. It'll be man-for-man marking. If it is a zonal marking system, you want to try and disrupt the zonal strategy. One of the best ways to do this is by telling a player to come short. Now, we haven't actually enabled the short corner routine. We're just telling a player to come short. What that will do is give you the option of the short corner, or at least the opposition thinks you have the option for the short corner. They will then drop a player from the near post area, and that could sometimes be a good aerial defender or a fullback or something like that. They will drop that guy out to mark your C2. In this case, it could be a C1. Whether you want your C1 or C2 is kind of up to you. For me, if I'm actually doing a near post routine, I would have one of the better creators, or at least somebody with high crossing. If I'm not really going to do the short corner that much, there's a way to vary it. I'll get to that in a second. I would use my C2 or my C3 or something like that. That will draw one of the opposition players out here and therefore give you more of a numerical superiority in the area where you want to hit the ball to, right? One of the other things we do also need to think about, let's switch this guy from go forward to lurk outside near, and then let's put this guy here, lurk outside center, for example. So what this is going to create is our D2 will actually be in this kind of area. So just to illustrate it, I'm going to bring him away from this and that. This is kind of going to be what it looks like if you are dominating, if the opposition aren't trying to counter. This is how the setup will look like. The advantage of having lots of guys lurking outside the area is the fact that you're sweeping up the second balls and you're causing a lot of chaos. I have noticed that this leads to a lot of goals. Things like deflections, the ball bouncing around in the area. You can get another corner and try and go again. This is really, really valuable. So try and have one or two players in this area, unless you are just trying to get bodies in the box and going for that initial header. If you have a huge team where everybody's good at jumping, you might just want everybody attacking from the edge of the area, a couple of lurking players, pump the ball in there, win the header, score the goal, direct. If you have a normal team or you want to just vary up your routines, have a couple of players in these areas. They may not always do what you want them to do. I have seen very weird decision making from some of these players, but it does provide a huge benefit more often than not. The disadvantage of the short corner is you're bringing one of your C players out there, so you're drawing him out into this area, but it is taking a marker away. It's taking one more body from the opposition marking structure out of the box, so that is really valuable for you. The set piece creator actually gives you the ability to add routines. The best way to do this is just duplicate the current routine, and then we're going to have 3 routines. Now, you can see this screen over here. This is basically the variety. You can see more often, average, and less often. So you can design the routines to have like a bread and butter stock routine. Let's call that routine 1. You can have then a real crazy change-up routine. Let's call that less often, routine 3. And then a normal change-up routine, which is routine 2. What you're not changing here is the kick taker generally, and the type of corner. You can obviously change it between routines. So routine 2 could be an outswinger. Routine 3 could be, back to an inswinger, but with a different taker. I personally don't like to do that because it defeats my realism focus. For me, I prefer to see one player taking different types of routines because this is quite simplistic. Most teams have a ton of routines. If it was this simplistic in real life, nobody would score a goal from a corner ever again because you could just learn the other team's 3 routines and you can say, oh, look, it's the left footer going for the corner. So now it's going to go to the far post and we can defend it like that. Easy enough. I also try not to change the A1s and things like that too much. I do vary a little bit, 1 or 2, between the routines, but I don't like to do drastic changes because, again, in my head canon, it feels to me like that would be then predictable. It would be a little bit of a trigger. Oh, this guy's moving there, which means the ball's going to go there. And that's kind of obvious for a lot of teams, right? Because if you've got somebody like, let's say, Liverpool and Virgil van Dijk, who is definitely the A1 in the current Liverpool team, you would mark him. And if he goes to the near post, you know, okay, the ball's coming to the near post. If he goes to the far post, you know, okay, the ball's going to the far post. So you can kind of predict that. Whereas the whole decoy thing that I was talking about earlier, you move Van Dijk to the far post and then you deliver to the near post where, let's say, Gakpo and Nunez are standing. That's still, 14s, 15s in jumping. Why not? I cannot conclusively say whether the AI learns like this or not, whether it actually learns your routines, but in my head canon, that's how it works in football, and therefore I try to play it realistic. So let's call this one routine 1, say, and then let's change up routine 2. Something you can change up is to just hit mixed. So now if you have a good spread of players, this taker will choose where to go. And to be honest, this is a good spread because he's got somebody lurking at the near post. He's got a far post guy. Maybe he won't deliver it as much, and maybe we need to think about, do we want our B1 there? Because this guy isn't really a header. Maybe we'll put a, A3 there at the far post. Let's change it something like this. Let's change the A3 to, say, attack far post or something like that. That gives us a little bit more variety. And now because this is mixed, the opposition has absolutely no idea where it'll go, but the taker has lots of variety. He can play it short, he can play it to the edge, he can play it near post, he can play it center, he can play it far post. He has all the choice in the world. So this can be quite good to keep changing things up a little bit. I love that. And that's why I kind of like, if we go back here, attack ball from edge of area, because then the guys will attack the ball wherever it goes to some extent. And therefore you can really mix things up and make your team very, very efficient, effective, as long as the familiarity is high. Because high familiarity means there's communication between the taker and the guys attacking the ball, and he gives them a little signal and they know the ball's going to go there, so they all jump there, right? So that can be good to take advantage of. Routine 3, I want to focus on the short corner. As you can see, our C2 player moved from this area to here, and this is how it will actually look in the match engine. The guy will come in front of the ball and it'll be played short, and then your taker will run to this side. He will run to the infield side normally. From this angle, if he's a left footer, he would go down the line, but that brings offside into play, which is why if I am considering a short corner routine, I like to have Inswinger, because that removes the dodgy offside. In FM, there have been a couple of edge case situations, especially with throw-ins, by the way, where there were always offsides, and this short corner with the outswinger tends to be one of them. I don't know if they've patched it yet because I've actually moved away from that. I generally use an inswinger if I'm going for the short corner for that reason. But also, the C2 can kind of shield the ball as he receives it. Then the TK goes somewhere here. The marker follows the C2, and then the ball's laid in. The TK is completely free, or the taker is completely free to then whip the ball in. It tends to be a back post thing, which is why I generally have my A2 at the far post, because then that can be activated. B1 at the far post is something I sometimes do, but not if I have the short corner set up. And the thing is, this will always be a 2-on-1. The opposition is only going to drop one marker out there. Normally, they put the man marker only for one guy, and therefore you can generate a quick 2-on-1 crossing opportunity as long as your players don't do something stupid. It can happen. They do sometimes make bad decisions up there and lose the ball or try and dribble it or get tackled. Can happen. It can also be interesting to generate a little bit of a supply chain. So as you can see, the taker can put it to C2. C2 gives it back to the taker who's here. C3 has gone to this kind of area, so that's a shooting opportunity. C1 is also in shooting opportunity, so they could pass the ball in like a half horseshoe and then take a shot. It could happen, but normally the opposition is trying to get out of the box as well. So you have to remember that opposing force too. So again, I do like to have a dedicated short corner option, but at a low frequency. Down here, you can modify routine frequencies if you ever need to change it up again. I like to have it as less often short in swinger. That tends to be one of my favorites, but I'm not going to have it at more often because I just don't like seeing short corners, to be honest. It doesn't please my eye and my senses. I love those big crosses into the box and big players winning big headers. That's just something I like to see, and therefore that's usually what I play for with my routine 1. My routine 2 tends to be mixed and on average because I do like to have a little bit of variety. Now, This has been super long already. I want you to try and just think about all of these basics. They can be applied to things like free kicks. So up here, if you change it to free kicks, things like wide free kicks and deep free kicks, you can modify things a lot. The problem with the deep free kick is it's very linear. It's hard to create angles. Generally, your player is going to go to the far post with those free kicks. Let's have a look. Deep free kick. Aim for, yeah, you can choose whatever you want, but the best option tends to be far post. Personally, though, because it's so difficult to score from these deep free kicks, I would just throw it to mixed and go from there. If you're a possession-based team, you can actually go for a short deep free kick and then try and capitalize on the chaos to then play the ball through and get the ball forward like that. That's an option as well. Free kicks from shooting range are quite interesting. Free kicks from wide basically are the same as corners, or at least you can set things up same as corners. Free kicks from shooting range are quite interesting because, again, it tends to be how many players can we distract. You can put your aerial threats to attack different posts. If we introduce a box threat, you can again have attack this post, that post. Your creators will be able to lurk or stand with the taker. Whether or not you want to do that, that's up to you, but it does introduce the option of that little short free kick. And then your recovery defenders are important as well because you don't want all the players forward. So free kicks is a lot more simple, I think, than corners. You can score a lot of interesting goals from them too. Throw-ins, again, especially attacking throw-ins, you will then have to choose, do we work it into box or do we have a long throw? Now, the offside bug that I was talking about with the throws appears now to be fixed. In the attacking third, the short throw-in, especially near the corner flag, was always offside, but they have fixed that when it's work into box. The guy who throws in now hustles to get back onside. So if, let's say a couple of months ago, you had chosen a long throw or something like that, just on the basis of not giving away those offsides, you can now safely go work into box now. Do you want a long throw anyway? That's kind of up to you. Again, in our attributes video, we discussed the different benchmarks of attributes. And if you want to really engineer a big long throw, you want an attribute level of something like 15 or more, 18, 19, 20 to really get into Rory Delap territory. Let's look at the long throw taker over here. We have Matty Cash, who has decent long throws. Let's bring him up to the top. Yes, and take control. Why not? Austin McPhee, go sit on the bench. Okay, we've got Cash set up as the number one throw taker from both sides. Get in. So, 17 long throws will get the ball very, very decently into the box. 11, 12 should get it to the edge of the box. Basically, you want a couple of good guys, or at least one big player here to get the flick on. A flick on is one of the big things you're trying to do at this near area if the attribute isn't 18 or more. 18 or more tends to be able to get it into this area, kind of into the 6-yard box. But 15 and below tends to be in this area, 15 being here and 12 being somewhere here. So think about that and which players you're putting into which positions. Think about the fact that these guys are going to be heavily marked by the opposition's big player. So somebody like a C2 is here near side. That can be effective to get the second ball and then whip across in. Having a big player at the far post is also really good. So an A3 or an A4 up here. The default setup, to be honest, is really effective, and I've seen plenty of goals from just this default setup. Where the throw-in taker throws it to the A1 and the A2, they flick it on into these guys. Sometimes a B1 could be a good thing. Switching the D3 to a B1 can make you control that player a little bit more. So again, you select these little dots, bring it into the green thing, and then you can attack the ball from edge of area, for example. That could be quite dangerous because these guys will flick it on and this guy is oncoming and he can read because of his anticipation and off the ball, he can get on the end of that flick on. Or the big guys at the far side can get on the flick on. If you want, you can swap something like the A2 for the A3, bring the A3 into that box area and bring the A2 back. So you've got an even bigger player winning the header after the flick on. That could be really effective too. The long throw setup is a little bit more configurable because you're getting the ball into the box in a specific way. You're looking at flick ons, you're looking at individual player positioning in a certain way. So you can design it like a corner kick. Work into box isn't quite as easy. You can see your players will kind of be in their normal formation. Your fullback goes out for the throw. I feel like work into box isn't as configurable as it should be. As I click this, you don't get a role setup kind of screen, which is a little bit disappointing, but it is what it is. On the defensive side, you basically need to start thinking in the opposite way. You click scenario defend, and now you set up your defense. You might want to change some of these things. Again, when you look at the defaults, I clicked hybrid. This is a hybrid setup. We've got one counter attacker, and if you click this, pace, dribbling, and finishing are the stats when the assistant picks. Sometimes you might get weird picks here, so it might be worth assigning this list yourself. Personally, I've seen my assistant pick some really weird players to be in this position. I've had Harvey Elliott as a Liverpool manager in this position, and I'm thinking, what? I had Darwin Núñez, Mo Salah, Victor Osimhen, players like that on the field, and they've picked Harvey Elliott. To be fair, he's one of the shorter players, so it makes sense. However, I think he doesn't fit these actual categories. So yeah, just a little tip, you might want to set these. The point is, the ball will be cleared and this guy will try and pick up the ball, hold it up for support, and then play it on. So these attributes that are selected may not be what you want. You might want a little bit of pace and strength as well. You probably want a little bit of vision, so Harvey Elliott wasn't the worst pick. The problem was his pace. You can kind of look at this C1 as something like a target man, but somebody who has to go down to the flanks to pick up the ball. Obviously, you can have more C players. You can have a C1, C2, and so on. You can set up a good counter-attacking tactic in this way. I do like a couple of players on the edge of the area. You can obviously set them to stay forward. You can set all of them to stay forward. In fact, like this. This could create some really interesting direct counterattacks. The problem then is you've got very few players in the box. So this would probably suit a more direct kind of team instruction and tactic. Whereas if you're playing a more standard thing, this kind of thing might be a little bit better. You use the C1 as a target man, they hold it up, and then these two edge of box guys run out. So you might actually want to have it like this, where your C1 and C2 are your really fast players, and your C3 is, again, maybe a fast player, but also a player with some strength and with some vision to actually find C2 and C3 running in beyond them. That could be something to look at. So this tends to be quite interesting. The other thing that's interesting is the A1, A2, A3 and stuff. You can see with Zonal, A1 is in the center, A2 is near center, and A3 is far center. Now, when we talked about the near post being one of the most valuable areas, it's only A2 who is there, and A1 is kind of lost. Player mark is being done by A4 and A5. So now, if we look at this as the setup, and we imagine that the AI is playing this defensive setup, when we set up our attacking situation with our A1, A3, A4, all of them attacking that front post, even A2, let's say, we are creating a significant amount of superiority in that kind of area. So I like to actually change this up a little bit and switch the A1, for example, to actually mark the near post or near center normally, and I bring this guy to the center, something like this. I might have this guy at the far post or far center. Let's call it far center. Let's call it near center. I might even remove the far center and put this guy near post. So then I'm defending the near area, because for me, that's the dangerous area. And a lot of the times I have a goalkeeper who's good at rushing out, so he can kind of cover the center and even the far post. The goalkeeper can generally get out there because I play him as a sweeper keeper normally. That's what I like. That's the profile of player I like. So the goalkeeper can deal with those lob balls to the far kind of area. So this might be something you look at if you're playing a man marking system. Again, this was a preset that we selected earlier. You can absolutely change it to a player marking kind of system where you just make everything player mark, and player mark. And now we've got man marking. While our A6 is marking near post, we can have another guy marking far post. So now we've got those posts marked, and we've got 4 players man marking the opposition top threats. So that's something you can do as well. Completely up to you how you set this up. I like the hybrid system because then I can actually put my A1 at the near center zone. I can put my A2 as well in the center, and I can lock down that box or 6-yard box with my best aerial players. In any case, I hope this has given you some value. I hope this has maybe changed your line of thinking a little bit, at least some of you. I hope if you're a newer player, you have learned something from this. Again, this stuff isn't completely meta, but this was just an explanation to try and get you into the way of thinking, how things work, what you can do with things, and how to kind of manipulate it, visualize what you're trying to do. Very much appreciate you watching these videos, taking the time to comment. I will talk to you there. I make a point of reading all of the comments, especially the top level comments, the second level or bottom level comments, however you call them in the thread. I sometimes miss those, but I absolutely see and I try to respond to all of those top level comments. Hope you've enjoyed and have a lovely weekend. Cheers!